If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hey Sirisha, can you hear us?
Yes.
So I think we are just on time, and considering the timelines and everything, let's get started. So probably initially what I'll do is talk more about the approach of the training. I hope you have seen my trainer profile as well. So in terms of industry experience, I carry more than 10 plus years of experience in both SAP HCM and Workday side of things. Specific to Workday, I would say worked on multiple international client implementations. Not just one module. I think the expansion, from an expansion point of view, started with HCM, which you already know is the core part of things, and then worked on multiple areas, including time tracking, absence, compensation, recruiting, payroll as well. So like you must have seen Workday being a very connected system. These all modules talk to each other. So during the training as well, I'll talk a lot of connection points as well, where you will understand how different modules talk to each other. So that would be my objective, the training. And I believe in terms of my, one of the key things which I expect from the training, from the other side is, you should be, very much open about any questions which you have. You should understand things, you can always, cross question and understand or ask questions, so that, it becomes a good value add for you as well. So that's pretty much my introduction in terms of, overall training delivery as well as, experience. Apart from that, within the training, what we have is, very specific targeted approach on the time tracking side, right? So we'll initially, at least in the today session, we'll talk about a lot of basics and everything, but we can talk more once the intro part is over. On the Workday side of things, Sirisha, how much do you know? Do you know HCM, or do you have any basics on that? Because accordingly, I'll probably drive the discussion accordingly, right? So that it will be helpful for you. So are you aware of any specific modules in Workday right now, or you are just learning time tracking for the first time?
I'm a little familiar with the Workday screens.
Okay.
And I've worked with like SAP and Workday integration, so that part I'm aware, and little bit of the screens, but not like, much like in the back end.
No worries, no worries. We'll talk about everything end to end. All right. I think we can get started right now with the training. Let me share my screen, and then we can, probably talk about each and everything once. So I hope that you already have the access to the, the material provided on the LMS, right? So we'll be talking about that, and in the future sessions, we'll talk more about the, hands-on on the tenant side of things as well. So let me share my screen and let me know if you can view it or not. You can see the screen now?
Yes, Rose, we can see.
Awesome. Awesome. Let me put it on a slideshow mode as well, which would be helpful. Let me drag it here. For some reason, my Zoom is kind of, in between going, crashing, but hope you guys can see the screen and, listen to me carefully as well. Like there's no lag in between, right?
Yeah, there's no lag.
No, it is.
And these recording sessions will be shared, right?
Yes, that's correct. So you will have all the recordings as well. Same thing. I think I'm sure Zantac has already, we have the support team already provided the links as well, and I can walk you through as well about that. So the meetings are recorded for your benefit only. If you want, you can go through. But like I said, right, I want your, I would say, attention in terms of, the live meeting only, because that's the main objective, right? So that you understand.
Right.
All right. So Workday time tracking, I would say, within all the modules, is one of the key modules. The reason being, this module is kind of very much interconnected to payroll side of things. A lot of companies use, Workday time tracking because of multiple aspects. The key aspects would be, how do you manage the employee time, which is very much known. Obviously it is very straightforward that time tracking would be used for, managing employee time. But within the time tracking side of things, there are other aspects as well, which are, assigning different schedules, tracking time, managing absences, and payroll side of things. So let's jump on to the slides and then we can talk more about it, because you should probably understand how exactly it works from a time tracking perspective. Uh, but before that, there are certain disclaimers and certain policies which we wanted to cover as well. These slides, examples, and the content is very much for information only. Obviously, this is obviously copyrighted by Zarantech. These are very specific time tracking modules. Obviously you should, on the legal side of things, obviously it should not be transmitted in any means. And there are certain images obviously which are open source, or certain images which are copyrighted as well. So just wanted to share that disclaimer as well to you. All right, now before we talk about overall key things for today, I think first session which Pushpa and I wanted to cover is more on the introduction part of things. We want to take a lot of time to give you more understanding of the module. Reason being, uh, from your experience, what I understand is you have certain amount of knowledge in terms of interaction part of things. But obviously, within the module there could be certain areas which are very much specific. So we'll talk about that, not just limited to the slides. We'll talk in general the industry experience part of things as well to you. Okay. And in terms of introduction, we'll talk about multiple aspects, that what are the benefits and what are the key areas are there within time tracking, especially on the Workday side of things, that how exactly it talks to different modules. Then we will talk a little bit about the next three items which are more on the hands-on side, but we'll tell how to approach it. What should you be thinking if someone tells you that you have to set up time tracking, or you have to change certain time code groups, or you have to make sure the time entry setup is being corrected. So I would be talking about each and everything in detail from two aspects as well. One is obviously, vanilla config, very straightforward. How do you build things? And second one would be more on the correction side of things as well. So in the upcoming sessions, we'll talk more about that. But today, the session would be more on the intro and, the basic side of things. All right. Hope you can see the next slide as well. And if you have any questions in between, Sirisha, you can jump in between. All right.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Yeah, Workday time tracking. Obviously, I think if you compare it with SAP, if you compare with a lot of industry applications, I think the one of the key things which Workday time tracking is very strong in is how it is very much focused towards end user, the UI part of things. Once we deep dive into things, you'll understand it is very much focused towards the ease of access, be it from the employee side of things, that how employee logs in, what are key features are there, the ease of doing access, those kind of areas. So from that perspective, it is very much I would say consumer driven or the end user driven. So if you think of multiple participants within HR technology system, right, there would be obviously end users who are actually logging the time, right? People working in shifts, people working in factories and everything, right? So to make things intuitive, I think Workday time tracking is one of the key things. It is very simple UI, which is very easy to use. One of the key factors is that. Additionally, I think from Workday time tracking, the good part is how do we link the global policies. So a lot of modules have certain limitations to have the overall setup being done for a country from start to end, right? It requires more of an effort. So let me give you an example for that. Let's say I'm sure within the SAP side of things, right, there could be let's say you are implementing it for one country, let's say India, right? And there are certain your company expands to China as well, right? And you have India and China, so a lot of components would be very much specific to India and China, right? Sometimes for SAP or be it Oracle systems or success factors, right, the effort required is a lot in terms of doing things. A lot of setup or basic setup of things are replicated, but in Workday time tracking, I would say a lot of things can be used globally. So one of the key factors which is easy to deploy is you can deploy Workday time tracking comparatively faster. right? So that is one of the things.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you compare with typical SAP cycles, right, I'm sure you must have seen, it requires a certain amount of changes in the SPRO, then changing in the table side of things, changing a lot on the UI sometimes as well. On the ABAP side of things as well, you have to have some logics there, and then finally that information is used by SAP payroll or sent outside to a different vendor. But in case of Workday, I think the key advantage which you will surely see is it's more faster in terms of customization, more faster in terms of integration, and more faster or more connected to multiple modules, right? You don't have to customize a lot of things between these modules. There are a lot of connections already built in as well. uh, and let's talk about that before I move to the second topic, second pointer, right? Imagine an end user, right, who uses company's payroll. Obviously he or she gets paid for that, and the person is using absence as well, the person is using time tracking as well, everything from all module perspective, right? So how one module talks to another is very different or very interconnected within Workday. For example, let's take a scenario that employee is taking a holiday, right? Employee is a time tracking user. Employee has to log in and log out, right? The person belongs to the users who have to log in and log out, right? Then for them, how exactly these modules are connected, that matters a lot. So let's say the person's work schedule, right? The person is required to work from Monday to Friday, right? And let's say on a Friday, the person is saying, okay, uh, the person is applying a sick leave, right? What is the impact on the time tracking side of things? How exactly he or she will be paid, right? That can be set at one time, and that will follow from that perspective. It won't be like that absence has to send information separately to payroll. You can build things to either be driven from time tracking side of things as well. So let me give you a more example of that. A person can technically apply their time offs or absence from the time tracking side of things, so that everything related to their presence and absence is sent from time tracking. Hope it is understandable, right, Sirisha? You understood this one, right? So on the app, in the SAP side of things, right, you have certain areas of applying an absence, right, and certain screen to apply your time, basically login and log out times. You can technically build Workday time tracking to either receive the absence information directly or indirectly, and you can drive a lot of things either from Workday time tracking as well. So person's absence information can be driven from time tracking side of things or from the absence module as well. So there are multiple ways of doing that. We'll talk more about it once we talk about in future modules.
Okay.
All right.
So how about the landscape? Like, once you do customization, like similar to SAP, like we have like multiple landscapes for moving changes.
Sure. So let me talk about more on the intro side of Workday as well. I think that would be important for you. Reason being, so within SAP, right, you have a usually a gold system, right, which is kind of the key config system. There is a production system, there is a quality system, and there are certain dev systems as well, right? From there you move your transport of the configuration from one tenant to another, right? On the SAP side of things, right, you use STMS and underscore import and these kind of activities which are falling under SAP basis. You perform a change and you move it between these areas, right?
Right.
But within Workday, so I'm deviating from the topic, but this is important for you. We can take more time on the foundation side of things. Within Workday, you have different instances, right? So SAP is different from Workday. Reason being, Workday is a SaaS application where everything, you just need a browser with a link, with a login ID and password, and you can access. It is as good as Facebook or Instagram or any other website, right? As good as anything which can be run on an internet, right? That's it. So all the configuration side of things as well. So within SAP, you are using SAP application and using, SPRO, going to the going to the configuration, reaching out, going through that application, SAP application GUI, and then changing things within Workday. Everything, whatever you do, happens on the browser only. You would be able to access the configuration changes on the browser. You would be able to work as an end user on the browser. You'd be able to, do a lot of things, so everything is related to just the browser screen in terms of the functional part of things, Sirisha. If we talk about integrations as well, to a majority of the extent, falls under the browser. But there are certain integrations like studio integrations where you require a certain installation on top of, the browser as well. So you have any questions on that? I'll explain more about it. But before that, I want to know, if you have any questions.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Awesome. So there is in Workday, there is a production instance, which is the live system, right? Then there is something called a sandbox, which is just a copy of production, which refreshes with the production information on a weekly basis, right? And there is a sandbox preview as well, which is more of, so these are different instances or the copies of the system, right? So sandbox preview again is very much specific to Workday releases. So Workday as a product provide 2 different releases every year, right? With the new features and everything. So that falls under sandbox preview tenant. So tenant is nothing but just a copy, something like a quality, right? So it's just a copy of the original system. Okay. And then there are different implementation tenants, and implementation tenants are nothing but, your test environments where you develop the work and you move, you test it out, right? Within the Workday instances, right? Usually as someone who is doing the configuration, everything is intact, all the modules are in the same area. It's nothing like that, that this instance is just for Workday absence, or this instance is just for Workday time tracking. No, everything would be interconnected. And as soon as you change things, you can move from one tenant to another, not using transport, but using certain areas, certain capabilities, which are object transporters and solutions and all those things. So we can talk more about that, how do we migrate. But
Yes.
But but very high level, I think this was the key thing which I wanted to convey as well. So just imagine Workday being a browser system, having multiple instances, having different copies of it. But obviously anything moving to production, technically from a path perspective, should go via sandbox system. It should ideally go via quality, usually in SAP side of things. Same ways we are expecting that if you follow the standard approach, it will go through the sandbox. Okay.
Okay.
And sandbox is something which is very close to the production data, right? In the real world of things, let's say you are facing some issue, some user is unable to access something, and obviously in production data you don't have every access. So what is the closest system where you can check and troubleshoot, which is sandbox, right? It is refreshed on a weekly basis, and you can try out different things. So sandbox is very critical in terms of your Workday journey as well, Sirisha. So you have to make note of that how important sandbox is, right? All right. Now moving ahead. So within I would say time tracking, right? Time tracking is very much interconnected to certain specific modules, which are like really close. You cannot think of time tracking without that, right? And the first one is Workday HCM. I think Workday HCM, again, it is simple as PA and OM on SAP. All the basic job profile data, all the basic eligibility information, all the basic organization information, cost centers, job profiles, anything on the basic level of things, company code, everything end to end falls under HCM, right? So HCM would be the core setup. So without HCM you cannot implement time tracking. Number one, HCM is the number one module which has to be implemented. So HCM would have all the HCM is primarily on the human capital management, about employee profile, employee address, employee details about different transactions and everything, like person applying any hiring transaction, termination transaction, any change of transaction, anything related to usual HR stuff. It falls under HCM. So HCM is the key basic module, which is anyways required for all the modules. It is the mother of all modules actually. So firstly, HCM should be there. And within HCM and time tracking, right, it would be more on interconnection, how exactly HCM and time tracking talk, right? So HCM as a module is, just think of it providing a lot of information about employee type, right? Me as an employee, as Raj versus Pushpa versus you, right? We belong to different locations, different entities, different areas. Our employee type can vary, right? You can be full-time, I can be part-time, it can vary. Depending on depending on the job profiles as well. You can be someone, managing an operations team. I can be someone who doesn't require using time tracking. So all that information comes from HCM. Right? The core information about an employee comes from HCM. The logic is built on the time tracking side, right? For example, if someone is eligible for time tracking, I know I'm going deep on technicals, but this is important for you to understand. I can skip these parts and directly jump on tenant, but I think this is really important for you to understand, Sirisha.
Yes.
How exactly it module works, right? For time tracking to have a good configuration or information, you can have inputs from HCM, right? It drives a lot of things. And from HCM side of things, in terms of eligibilities, you can think of time tracking as a module where it is more of a receiver of information, right? So imagine time tracking on one side of a room, and HCM sending a lot of information to that, to drive the eligibilities, to drive a lot of things. Okay. Now talking to payroll, because you were interested in that part of things, right? How payroll works specifically, right? With time tracking. So obviously payroll, from your journey of SAP as well, Sirisha, let me ask a question. How exactly, what would be the flow for an employee? Because I want it to be a dialogue so that I understand that how much you are grasping as well. Accordingly, I can tone down my, pace and, complexity as well. So let's talk about Workday payroll or SAP payroll, for example. How exactly would a person get paid, right? Let's talk about that. Can you probably share your input, thought process between SAP modules, how the information would be flowing?
So in general, certain HR data needs to be needed for processing payroll, like employee details, and then time data. So for in few instances, time is already evaluated out of the system. So in that scenarios, the time integration need to be done with an external system. In some instances, we just get the raw data like absences and attendances, and the time needs to be evaluated in the system. So once we have the time information, then like all the basic earnings deductions or employee salary, those kind of components need to be set up. So then once the payroll is triggered, so obviously like all your gross net calculation done.
Okay.
Along with benefits and garnishment details.
Awesome. In simple terms, totally agree with that. In simple terms, within Workday, right?
Right.
Let's look at someone, let's look at employee journey, right? Let's say I'm joining your team, I'm joining your location, let's say, or I'm joining from any other location as well. Let's say I'm an employee based out in China. Okay. So I join in the company. The first module where I'll be interacting indirectly or directly would be the HCM, where it will talk about my home location, it will talk about my office location, it will talk about my job profiles, it will talk about my address, if it will talk about my emergency contacts, it will talk about my overall manager name, It will talk about my unit name. It will talk about my co-workers. It will talk about my compensation, indirectly, right? It will talk about my job profile as well. Now, as an employee, as Raj joining the China office, right? I am a time tracking employee. Okay. I need to log in and log out to drive my eligibility, to be eligible for that, the information would be flowing from HCM, right? My employee type is really important. My location would be really important, and my job profile would be important. It won't be like that, every China employee in that location would be logging time. There would be certain managers, certain directors, certain people who are not even logging, right? Obviously, they don't need to because of their job profiles. So time tracking is one. Now, I being an employee is, getting certain paid time offs or absences and certain unpaid ones as well. Let's say I get, for first year, I don't get anything from the company, right? Only after first year, I'll get something. And let's say as an employee, I need to take an urgent emergency, absence. For 2 days, I won't be available for next week, let's say, right? So that also a key factor. Okay. So there are two parts of it now. Number one, time tracking. So let's say for the first week, I'm working from Monday to Friday, logging hours. And next week I am, taking 2 days off, and next 3 days I'm working, right? Got it? And let's say it is the end of the month, I'm getting paid. China being a monthly one, let's say I'm getting paid. Now for Workday payroll to receive information, there would be at least two factors here. Number one, on the absence, that I am taking 2 days extra, which ideally I should have, worked on, but I was unable to. Then those 2 days salary would be reduced, prorated. Ideally, I should be paid for 10 days, considering, 10 working days in 2 weeks, but I'll be paid only for how many days?
8 days.
Awesome. Now, in 8 days, there would be certain times where, I'm required to work for 8 hours, within 8 hours, let's say on my first day, I was very excited as an employee, and I work for 12 hours. Okay. Then you should have in logic, then as a time tracking configuration, if the employee works extra, how they will be paid? Will they be paid, certain dollars to it, or they are just expected to work for 8 hours, or there would be certain rules to it, all those things. All those things are handled within time tracking. If you are paid less as well, for example, if the employee is taking a half day, or employee is working just for 6 hours, how exactly it will be paid? How about the employee meal breaks in between? How exactly employee would be paid? All that logic, all that, information in the background is configured in time tracking module. Understood?
Right. Again, like usually, like it depends upon the employee, like whether it's an exempt or non-exempt, right? So based
Correct.
on the employee, and also depends upon the work location. If it's a California, like it's a different time of type of time calculation.
Exactly. California state law will come into the picture where, certain meal breaks would be required. Let's say, Germany has certain rules to it. Female employees need to take this much break. Certain employees need to take this much break as well. So all these things are kind of driven, but you should not look at exempt and non-exempt. That is very much US specific. That is true, and obviously that is a factor. But it could be as simple as someone working in China office of this location having this job profile are eligible for time tracking. So it is very much customizable. It can be driven based on as simple as someone working from this location altogether, or someone falling under this job profile, right? So all these things can be, it is very, I would say, flexible in terms of driving that, right? Now finally, this employee getting paid for 10 days, coming to our example, right? So there are two contributing factors to it. Number one, obviously the absence part of things. Number two is time tracking. Number three, let's talk about number three now. Not about, you don't have to look at the slides. Number three would be, let's say the employee was, joining on a holiday, right? So for holiday, employee will be paid or not, right? That is also a consideration. Holiday which is Workday, holidays and calendars, right? Depending on the location, it is also connected to time tracking. So now, three things are surely connected to time tracking. One is HCM, one is absence, one is obviously payroll, and obviously one of the components which is there connected to all this is Workday calendars, holidays, public holidays, the overall calendar which you put in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Now there is something called period schedules as well, which we'll talk more about in the system. But there is something called period schedule and work schedule. Just imagine this as someone like a rotation system. As an employee, if you are expected to work Monday to Friday 9 to 5, right, that is logged in that work schedule. And if there is some pattern to it, every third Friday you'll be working for 1 hour late or on the night shift. All those things are logged in that as well. So if you see, Sirisha, everything is interconnected. The work pattern of the employee is interconnected. The holidays are interconnected. Absence is interconnected. Payroll is interconnected, and obviously HCM, right? You understood the work schedule part of things as well, right? Which we'll talk more, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
Because an employee, if let's say the employee schedule tells the employee to work at 9 to 6, right? And there is a change to it, every last week of the month, the employee has to work on a night shift, let's say. So depending on that, every rule will be driven as well.
Right. All your schedule, your day offs, your holidays, everything will be assigned to the work schedule.
Correct. And as we talk more about it, think of more, I'll probably give you one thing to think about it. Someone working on a night schedule, right? And obviously there would be midnight, there would be date change. So there are additional complexities added on top of that. So you have to think about that as well.
Okay.
As we talk more about the config in future, it would be more when, we'll talk more about it and we'll do hands-on. We can talk more about that. But in simple terms, Workday projects is also one of the modules which is primarily driven, more for, project side of things, where employee log their hours based on certain activity. Let's say there are a team of consultants in the team and they need to log hours based on certain activities. So they use Workday projects, but Workday projects is nothing but very much closely connected to time tracking. It has additional features as well, which are more towards budgeting and logging the overall estimate of employees and how much is the billing and everything. But you don't have to worry too much about it. First we'll cover the objective of this training is more towards time tracking, but as you learn time tracking, it would be very easy to understand the interconnection part of things as well.
So Workday projects is something similar to employee self-service?
No, so Workday projects, if I tell you in simple terms, Workday projects is a capability where you can drive a project within Workday. For example, you can log hours, how this hour which is logged is linked to certain activity. Those kind of things. As a manager, imagine you are driving a project. There are 20 employees who are working for a certain project, right? For each and every type of activity, they can log their hours in a day. So it is an enhancement on top of time tracking. Obviously, it would be an ESS capability, but it would be an MSS capability as well. So every capability has two parts of it, obviously, which is employees self, right? Employee self-service and manager self-service, but there would be admin part of things as well. So Workday projects is more towards, even though employees can log data and log out, information based on certain activities, but this would be more on, how the admins look at the data and how admins, kind of drive, certain decisions on top of that, right? And we can talk more. Workday projects in simple terms is just a way of capturing time in a more meaningful way, in a more, I would say, organized way and very direct way. Let me give you an example for that. Time tracking, you are just entering hour from 9 to 6. You don't have to worry that what all activity you did, right? You're just logging in an employee of, organization. Workday projects would have certain additional pointers to it where you have to log in hours based on certain activity, and that would be used for further reporting and tracking purposes. Okay. Sirisha, you understood this one?
Sorry. Yeah. Yes, Raj.
Sure. All right. Yeah. So like I said, right, it is more of an end-to-end experience, and this capability of time tracking, right? I'm sure you are aware that time tracking being a module can be used on obviously web browser. You can log in on the web browser as well. You can use your mobile phones as well to log your hours, if the mobile time tracking is enabled. And finally, a time clock, where, in your office gates, there will be swipe in, swipe out, and, it is indirectly logging the information and sending it to Workday. The last one from time tracking side of things, imagine, so first one and the second one is clear, right? Web and mobile, it is obviously Workday. It would be directly receiving the information, right? On the third one, which is physical clock, right, which is swipe in and swipe out in offices, right? Certain Kaba clocks are there, certain different type of clocks are there, but those are kind of, I would say in simple terms, storing that information and sending it to Workday system using a certain integration, which are time clock integrations, which are, basically all the information of swipe in and swipe out is given as input to Workday, and then the processing of that data happens. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yes.
Hope this, the basic overview is clear to you, Sirisha, right? Pushpa, anything to add on top of that? Just wanted your, your thoughts as well, so that it would be useful for Sirisha.
Yeah, Raj, it's a great explanation. So the basic is, yeah, it is very important to understand the basic. You have covered well on the Workday time tracking side. Workday, how it works is Workday has a single user experience and single global platform. And there is a single source of truth where we are managing the employee data, we are collecting the employee data, and then the employee schedule will be assigned automatically. Let's say the employee is working on any particular shift, like morning shift or evening shift or afternoon shift. So depending on the employee working schedule, so it will be auto scheduled in Workday, and also it track the time. So the employee will have the capability to go log in, like check in and check out. So the employee have a very single user experience for the tracking of the data, uh, for tracking of the data, like check in and check out time for the hourly employees. And also it manages the absence. Let's say if any employee has taken any paid time off, or employee has taken any sick time off. Okay, so the time tracking tool, it also track the absence for any employee. Okay, let's say in a week, the employee is schedule is, let's say 8 hours in a particular shift time. Okay, and when the employee is taking any absence, so for that day, the employee will be getting paid, but the system will notice that, okay, the employee has taken the time off on a particular day. Okay, so it is also very easy in Workday to track the data, and they manage the absence, the schedule will be assigned, and then the data, the final data will be sending over to the payroll for the processing. Okay. So why we are tracking the time? So ultimately, when we are tracking the employee working hours, so there is, I mean, that there is impact on the payroll. So employee will get paid accordingly based on the number of working hours. Let's say if employee is working on a overtime, or if employee is working on any of the premium shift hours, right? So for that, the data will be collected and then will be sending you over to the payroll, whether it is a Workday payroll or it is a third-party payroll. So there will be different system will be connected. So if it is a Workday payroll, within Workday, this data will, from the absence, the data will move over to the payroll. But consider there is, we are not using Workday payroll, and there is a third-party payroll, like we have the ADP or ENY or any other payroll vendor, right? So the Workday will be connected via our integrations, and from Workday, there will be this data will be sending over via integrations to the outside of the payroll, which is our ADP system or any other vendor the organization is using for. So this is how is the Workday concept, like Workday time tracking concept is the Workday time tracking is managed from end to end entire system in a single platform where it is easy to collect the data and process the time tracking, time hours, the schedule hours, and then process it to payroll for further processing. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Uh,
Thanks, Pushpa.
yeah.
I think, Sirisha, are you aware of integration as such? What exactly Workday integrations mean versus typical tech work? Are you aware of Workday integrations, how exactly it works?
I mean, I have little idea, but not. I mean,
Yeah.
I just have like little or oral idea. That's it.
Yeah. I think for time tracking understanding, that would be basic. I believe we can talk, I can probably talk about it as well so that, you can understand. And thanks, Pushpa, for bringing that up as well. It won't be a case where, you are always using Workday payroll as well, right? You might have to send information as well.
Right.
So
Right.
we can talk about that specific scenario as well so that you understand more from that perspective. There would be
Mm-hmm.
certain connections which are very, unique in a way as well. Uh, but right now, since we are going for the first session, how exactly are you liking the pace, or do you want me to keep it slower or a bit faster, or you like more examples? How exactly it is for you till now in terms of understanding the basics?
I think the pace is good, Raj. Let's go like this. So yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to like relate my understanding with overall time and payroll process. So yeah, I mean, I think we are good going in good space, and you covered like most of the high level aspects.
Sure. The reason why I'm asking this is because we could have probably approached this slide in a very different fashion where we are not talking a lot about it, but I think
Mhm.
considering your experience since you know HCM, right, and
Mhm.
then since you have not worked on any other module as such, right, so
Mhm.
that's where I'm trying to uh, give you a more holistic picture because no module in this ecosystem would work separately, that you can tell, okay, I work in time tracking without HCM basic knowledge, without the overall basic knowledge, it would be next to impossible to work on that as well. So that's where I'm focusing more on foundation part of things as well. So probably first two class, especially first today's class as well as tomorrow's class, what we will do is talk more about the basics because the system configuration is one part, but understanding how exactly it works is another part as well, right? So it should not be the case, to give you an example, that someone is changing a configuration but not understanding the impact of it, right? Because impact can be huge end to end, so that is also a consideration. In terms of one of the key things which I will talk more about is on the touch point side of things as well, right? And how exactly it talks to different modules. But before that, considering we are talking from more than, I think, almost 50 minutes now, let's take a break in between for a quick 5 minutes, quick bio break, so that we can be more recharged and start the session again. We can keep the session on for the time being. Let's take a 5-minute bio break and let's reconnect again. That's fine for you, Pushpa and Sirisha, right?
Sure, Raj.
Yes.
Awesome.
Um,
So Sirisha, one of the pointers which we were talking, right, uh, was more about integrations, right, which Pushpa as well mentioned, that there could be certain scenarios where we are not using Workday payroll as a module, right? Or Workday benefits as a module, or you are not utilizing Workday capability completely. And I'm sure in your previous experience as well, SAP being a strong module, obviously SAP is very robust on the payroll side of things as well, but not everyone uses you know every module of the same HCM suite. There are companies which will prefer having HCM of SAP, time tracking of Kronos, payroll of a certain vendor, right? So I'm sure you must have heard about Kronos as well, which are into time tracking. They are specialized into time tracking solutions, right? So these systems should be interconnected, right? That is one of the key things which you should think, that how these systems talk to each other, right? For example, your company might be using Workday, but you'd be paid out by, let's say, certain vendor, right? So how this information is going from Workday to that one vendor, that's where I think the whole integrations piece comes into the picture, right? And Workday being an HCM system, you'd have a certain other systems as well where you might need to send information, right? For example, your company might be using a reporting tool, or your company might be using certain tools where you need information coming in from Workday, right? Some reports should be there from a legal standpoint. You were talking about California, right, Sirisha? So for California state, let's say there is some rule that on a every quarter basis, the organization has to provide the list of employees working, more than 45 hours per week, right? So there should be certain output file which is going from Workday system to a specific system where it is being received. By output, I mean it can be an Excel file, it can be an automated generated file, it can be a scheduled run as well. So there are a lot of parts of it, right? There could be certain batch jobs as well, which I'm using Workday. I'm using SAP terms for you so that it is easier to understand. So there could be certain batch jobs as well, which are running on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis to send this information, right? So Sirisha, hope you are understanding, right? If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So all these functional modules as such, if you see HCM, Workday payroll, absence management, projects, compensation, absence, recruiting, all these different modules talk to each other. But in terms of talking, since if we are using Workday time tracking only, right? If you are using just Workday time tracking, these modules talk to each other using standard logic. You don't have to worry too much. You don't have to do anything extra as such to convey information, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you see, you have a certain system which is outside the Workday scope of things, right? You need to send that information. That's where Workday integrations come into the picture. Workday integrations are nothing but, certain lines of codes where you are extracting the information from Workday system and sending it outside, number one, or you are receiving the information from a certain system. For example, let's say you are using time clocks, right? You are not using, employees are not logging their hours on Workday system or on their mobile devices. They are using a certain clock. They are going to office. Imagine a production company, you are building cars, and employees, workers join at 9 a.m. and leave at 9 p.m. It's a 12-hour shift for them, production shift. They don't use systems, they don't use mobiles, they don't have those configurations, and the company wants their physical presence to that factory, right? That organization. That's where a physical time clock will receive the information. And in terms of receiving, as soon as the information is received, there would be a certain logic to it where this information is sent to Workday system, right? In terms of Workday system, what connection do you need? You would need an integration. So anything outside the system, you need to connect, you would need an integration, both as an input and output, right? Imagine, in simple terms, imagine this being a water filter. Imagine Workday being a water filter. There would be an inlet pipe, usually the raw water, tap water, and there would be an output file, which output water, which is a filtered water, right? So these two connections, which are typically the pipes and all this plumbics and all, right, in terms of receiving the water as well as releasing the water, right? Those are integrations, both input and output, right? So these two systems connect to each other. It is very simple for you to understand, hopefully.
Yeah, sure.
And all the mechanism within water filter, all these machines and the purification system, all the logic, that is Workday system. That is Workday time tracking, Workday HCM, Workday absence management, Workday payroll, anything. So in simple terms, that is the easiest way of understanding how integrations work into the picture, right? Awesome. Hope it is important. It is clear to you. Reason being, within time tracking, right? Like Pushpa as well mentioned, right? There would be certain scenarios where you are not using Workday payroll, or you are sending out information outside for processing, right? Then that outside logic is done using the integrations only. That outside logic is just the filtered water, right? Which we are sending out. to send out that filter water, we need a tap, right, from the filter. So that tap and that outlet is Workday integrations. Receiving this Workday and processing this Workday time tracking information and sending out in the format which is accepted by the vendor or the third party system, right? Awesome. Let's move on, and I'll probably give this one, probably Pushpa can deep dive into it first, uh, and I can add on top of that. So Pushpa, over to you. You can talk about the overall self-service time entry, the different reasons of how exactly Workday consumer driven user experience works. So Pushpa, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Raj. Yeah. So let's now discuss more about like how it is, how Workday time tracking, how it improves the productivity for any organization, and how is the user experience. That is which is main, which is we have there are a lot of HR applications, but how Workday is like one of the good user experience application that will track the time, and it is a seamless time tracking system, like from the end to end. Like when you consider about, we are collecting the employee data, and then we are processing it, and then we are automating to the payment directly. The hours will be calculated, and then it will process to the payroll. Okay, so it is important, very much important, to understand how the Workday, how the time tracking, what are the options to enter time uh, in Workday. So first, let's talk about the self-service time entry. So when we say the self-service time entry, so there are multiple ways to enter time in Workday. One of the option is the user will go to the Workday tenant. So in Workday, for every system we call as, like you say that SAP production, right? So here in Workday, we called as a tenant. Okay, like we call as a Workday production tenant, then Workday sandbox tenant, or if there are, let's say, multiple development tenant or UAT tenant. So what we call a system as a individual tenant in Workday. So the employee can directly, they can go log into the Workday tenant, and based on the employee security, right? So consider that we are in a global organization, okay, and we have employee from different country, like US, India, and different geographic locations, right? So the employee will log into the Workday browser, and employee will, based on the employee security. So the time tracking is a concept, right? Um, it also has, like, every country has their own way of time tracking, and it has their own legal laws and regulations, right? When you say that US, sometime like you were talking about the California hourly employees, right? The exempt, non-exempt employee. Okay, so that is very specific to the California as a state where we are legally, the system, we have to build a system in a such a way that we are legally tracking time based on the US California labor laws. Okay, so so that is one option, is the employer will log into the system and then as a web browser, and then when the employee will be logging into the, that will be option called the time, right? So when the employee is going to the record the time, so if the employee is located in US and California, so based on the calendar, there will be one calendar view is going to be pop up, like where it is totally configured based on the employee, where the employee is located. Okay, so they consider the employee is working in California and belong to US. So immediately the tenant in the system, the all these the rules, the calculation, if the um, time sheet will appear based on the system that we have set up for that particular country. Okay, so the employee will log into the web browser, and then employee will have a view called the calendar view, where the employee is going to enter the time. Like it is more similar to our SAP system, right? In SAP, we have CATS, the cross application time sheet, where the employee can go and record the time. Or there are any third party system, right, where we are collecting the time data from a different system, and then that will be collected and then entered into the Workday. So similarly, here it is like in SAP, here in Workday also, there are different ways to log in the time. Okay. And also there are options to log into the employee can record the time using the mobile device. So when the employee is logging into a mobile device, again, the UI is going to be little bit different than our Workday web browser, but entire application, the functionality, everything is going to be remain same. Okay, we can cover it more when we deep dive into the um, chapter, again more detail like when we log into the tenant. But for your right now, for you to understand, so employee can log in to the web browser as well as the employee can log in using the mobile devices. Okay, and time can also be entered against the project. Let's say the employee is assigned to multiple projects, right? The employee based on the allocation. Let's say employee has assigned to project one 50% and another project as project two as 50%. Okay. So in Workday, we can have options to track time based on the project the employees assigned for. Okay, and based on the task also, let's say if employee is attending any particular conference, then employee has the ability to record the time based on the conference, or if they are going for utilizing that time for any of the team event. Also there is like based on the different task wise, the employee the Workday have the option to record their time based on the task. Okay, and it is very easy to access in a calendar view. So when we say the time entry, right, the time tracking, so the employee, whenever the employee is going to record any time, so immediately system will pop up a calendar view. It is based on a month, daily or a weekly view. Okay, so in a week, again in the system there are different, like what could be your start of the week, how you want to configure in the system. Based on that, your calendar will be appear, pop up, and for each day you can see how much how many hours the employee has logged in for, and for which activity or for which task the employee is assigned to, or which project the employee is assigned to. Okay, and also the employee has the ability to update. Let's say if employee has working on any different kind of event, also they have the ability to write down. There will be a comment that employee still, while logging in the time, employee can also update the comment that okay, for so and so activity, like for a ad hoc request, right? So for so and so activity, I was working for 3 to 4 hours during this time. Let's say the employee has the ability to record the comments also. Okay, and so this is all about the self-service time entry. Okay, then how about the mobile and web time clock? Okay, so when we and the employee will be logging in the time using the mobile device, right? So there are multiple ways the employee can check in and check out, or they'll directly the employee have the ability to enter the number of hours worked in the system. Okay, so when we say the web time clock, check in and check out, right? So there will be an option called web clock. So when the employee will checking in, so it will automatically capture the geographical location the employee is located in. Let's say when the employee is in US, and then based on the system time, the employee check-in time, this system will capture the employee check-in time. Okay. And similarly, like let's say employee is going for taking any break in between, or if employee is going for any meal break, then also this system will capture this is the time they check out for a meal break, and then the system will capture the time based on the different location, geographical location, based on the user is located. Okay. And also, the worker include automatic date and timestamp, right? Which I was talking about. The system will automatically capture the date and timestamp based on the system time zone, how it has been set up. And so these are the mobile and web time clock. And let's talk about the efficient approvals, right? Like whenever the employee is submitting any time, of course, it will go for the manager for the approval. And it is depending on the organization how they wanted to keep the approval process. Let's say it should go to the manager's manager, or it should go to the HR business partner or regional HR, based on the particular projects. Then the approval system can be built in Workday in such a way that it will route for multiple level of approval too. Okay. So manager can initiate a mass approval. Let's say there are 20 or 30 reportees, and who have submitted the time, right? So, and it is very difficult for a manager to, so when the employees submit the time, right, it comes to the manager Workday inbox. Okay. So there is a concept called in Workday, every employee will have a dedicated notification, alerts, and the inbox item. Okay. So whenever the employee receive any kind of action to be performed, right? Let's say manager, when the employee submit, then the manager will get a action related item, right? Whether to approve or to reject or to send back or deny. So these kind of items are called as a action related item. So it will come and sit in the Workday inbox. Okay. And manager will have the ability to view that who is by one employee. So whenever there are, let's say there are 20 reportees, so immediately the manager will receive a Workday inbox item. So which talks about more about that. Okay, say today, let's say the employee submitted for a week. So for a particular week, at each and every day, the employee has entered how many hours of time, how many hours has been entered for which activity and for which work. But if the employee has entered any time of, okay, this is my report is, and here the employee has entered the time off. So out of, let's say for a weekly time sheet, out of 5 days, the employee has worked for 3 days, and 2 days the employee has taken the time off. So the employee will have, the manager will have the visibility for a detailed visibility of what has been entered by, what has been submitted by the employee. So the manager either can go and then view to the each request and then approve one by one request, or if employee manager has any concern, let's say no, I think the employee has not entered proper hours, then the employee has the manager can send back for correction, or manager can deny the request also. So this is like how the approval process the manager can do, like for each for each single activity that the manager has received from an employee. Okay. And also, if there are more reportees, then it is very tedious job, right? The manager has to go one by one, click on one by one the inbox item, and then approve the request. So there is also something called the mass approvals, where the manager will perform certain tasks to access the mass approval, and where the manager can see, okay, here is my these many reportees for this is the time period. Let's say for 1st of March to the 15th of March, the employee has entered these many employees. This is the employee cost center, and these are the projects that employee has been, medical, this has been entered, and this is the volume. So directly the manager can, easy way for the manager to mass approve all the entries, okay, which is a seamless process for a manager. So the Workday also support the mass approval uh, in Workday. And also there are, the exception approval. Let's say, like in payroll, right, we have the pay periods. So period started, period ended, and to log the payroll, let's say we have a particular payroll, period started, period ended, and we log the pay period. This is the day that we are going to log for a particular period. Okay, so that none of the employees can make any changes to their data for that particular period. Okay, and then the payment will be processed. So similarly here also there is a time, there is a concept for the time block period. Okay, so when the employee, there is a particular period is defined, let's say if it is a monthly or bi-weekly pay period. So if the system, based on the system configurations, the after the time lock-in period, the employee cannot go and enter, make any changes to the time entry. Okay, within that period, when the time period is open, the employee can go ahead and then make any changes, how many times they can go ahead and then submit the time. But once it is logged, then system will not allow to enter any time. But let's say in case of any exception, let's say, okay, the employee has forgot to enter and submit any time, forgot to enter and submit any time, then the employee has gone ahead with the manager approval, like manually, no, here due to my some reason that I have not entered. Then there is also an exception that during that period, for that employee, the time lock-in period can be changed, and then also the employee can go and enter the time which is outside of your the time lock-in period, and then it will go, once the employee submit, it goes for the approval, right? So this is how our Workday the self-service time entry, and the employee can enter to the mobile and web time clock, and how it is, how the approval system happens in time tracking.
Awesome.
Yeah, Raj, you wanted
Awesome.
to
Yes,
add?
that's great actually. So, Sirisha, do you have any questions? I wanted to add on a couple of pointers, but before that, do you have any questions, Sirisha? I think it was very detailed explained. Do you have any questions in terms of, self-service time entry, how exactly mobile and clock, web time clock work, and what about the approvals and the thing about retro approvals, exceptions, and all that? Do you have any questions?
So it says like they can enter on the mobile also, sir. So setting up for mobile, is there any special needs need to be done for mobile?
Yeah,
Not
yeah, exactly. So that's a good question actually. So for mobile, obviously you have to enable certain things, but everything, the logic which you created on the web version, right, will work on the mobile.
okay.
There are additional capabilities as well, which can be added, but obviously those would be specific to mobile. But from the experience of it, a lot of clients prefer it, and a lot of clients do not prefer it. The clients which prefer all this would be clients where people are in sales, right? They don't have to go into office, and they're just logging their hours on mobile, right? But usually, if you see, majority of the clients, majority of the people, majority of the users, they prefer using web version or the clock version, right? Because either they have to come to office to swipe information, to swipe their cards and work, or they are coming to factory to work, or they are using their web versions, right? So if you see the current model of how the world it is being hybrid, right? So usually a lot of people kind of prefer using the mobile versions as well, but like I said, it requires certain additional changes as well. You have to enable it as well, but not so much effort in comparison to what you will feel in SAP, right? You might get your Fury application created, or you have different type of mobile apps for different versions. It is all intuitive. It is all reactive in nature, that depending on the screen, even if you open an iPad or a mobile or iPhone or an Android phone, everything would work pretty fine.
Yep.
So very limited effort is required, but from a tech side, certain aspects are there. Nothing fancy, it is more of an enabling it. If I answer in single word, we just have to enable it.
Okay, and also, is there any specific configuration that needs to be done at the timesheet level? Because like in SAP, we have a functionality like CATS. So do we have any like kind of setup that needs to be done for configuring the timesheets?
No. So I get the question actually. So usually on the CATS configuration side, right? You usually cross application timesheets, right? Basically ensuring that the end-to-end happen from a mobile perspective. No, everything whatever you configure for the web version would work for the mobile version.
Okay.
Exceptions are there, which we'll talk more, but in general you don't have to do anything extra. You just have to enable certain things, and then they would work plug and play. You don't have to worry too much. So that's where, if I see, if you compare from SAP, it is very fast in that, right?
Okay. So in general, like clients, they have like specific requirements that the employee cannot go back like more than 6 months. So the timesheet should not like let the employee to go back after a certain like for period like to modify the timesheet. So those kind of I mean things we can configure here, right?
Exactly. So like Pushpa mentioned, right? In terms of that, if I talk about that, just a second. Yeah, in terms of that, it depends on the pay period actually. So
Okay.
let's look at pay periods, right? Different pay periods are there where people work from, uh, let's talk about an employee who is getting paid monthly, right?
Mhm.
You are paid for the Feb month already. If you are changing something, you are not allowed to change. So a lot of eligibility is driven using that. It's, you don't have to do anything extra. It would be immediately only, you know by default it works on the pay period, but you can put additional validations as well. Usually
Mhm.
if you are paid for the previous month, you cannot change the data. That is how by default it works.
Okay. How about like if the employee can go back until 6 months?
No, you cannot. Technically you cannot, until unless
Okay.
you want an exception, but in general, no.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
I'm good. I don't have any other questions.
Okay, perfect. I think this is pretty much it. In terms of basics, I think we have covered a lot of things today. Like I said, right? I think the tomorrow session we'll talk more about all these basics first. I know there are a couple of things which I want to cover on actionable reporting and the calculation part, and this slide, which is really important. Why I'm
Mhm.
giving more time to the basics is, because we have to look at your
Mhm.
understanding of multiple modules talking to each other. So I think in
Mhm.
terms of covering the basics, I think we covered a lot. In terms
Mhm.
of pay periods, there are a couple of discussions pending which I will take tomorrow,
Mhm.
where we can talk about all these exceptions, all these things from an admin perspective, and from a reporting standpoint. For example, like you said, right, how the 6 months, if someone is going to enter sometime back in time, right, how do we handle that and those type of scenarios? Because configuration, as soon as we deep dive into configuration, you have to look at the use cases as well, right? So you'll find, while as much as you start working on it, and in the upcoming sessions, you will realize a lot of things which you had to do in SAP, you know extra, or create a configuration of things. You don't have
Mhm.
to do a lot of things here. It's already provided. There are certain features which are just by default assumed. For example,
Okay.
if you are paid in the previous month, ideally you cannot edit the information. You are
Mhm.
paid for that time already. So those kind of things, we'll talk more about it. But hope the session was good for you. In terms of understanding, what I'll do immediately is mark your presence as well, because I need to track your presence in the session, right?
Mhm.
And tomorrow same time as planned, we will talk more about it. And tomorrow as well, we'll cover the basics as well. And my plan is, from next week onwards, we'll start looking at the 10 and 10, the config, the overall setup part of things, right?
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's very informative, Raj. I mean, for me also, like I could recollect all the existing time process that I'm handling. So
Sure.
yeah, it's very
Sure.
informative.
Fortunately, I think based on our experience, I think the good part is, me and Pushpa both have previously worked on SAP. I worked on success factors as well. So I'm trying to relate it for you as well.
Okay.
But during an intro session as well, like I said, right, we should not relate it too much as well,
Okay.
otherwise you'll get confused. So assume
Right.
it to be a fresh one.
Mhm.
All right, so we'll meet tomorrow. Let's end this session. Take rest.
Mhm.
It's a lot of information as well. I don't want to over provide information which you are not able to grasp as well. So let's meet tomorrow and discuss further, right?
Okay. Okay.
Pushpa, anything to add before we close in?
Yeah, the same. Thanks, Ram. Yeah, we have covered enough the basics. So, Sirisa, you can just go through the detail, and then we can start from tomorrow with some more basic workday time tracking, like how it has been done, and then we'll proceed. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Take care, guys. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to ask your questions in the comment section below, and we will reply to them at the earliest.